The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held delegates from nearly 1,000 different species, each one watching the central stage where the fate of an entire world was about to be decided. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting clicks and whistles and growls into words that everyone could understand. Ambassador. Linda Morris stood alone on the human platform. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures to count. Her hands were steady as she held her data tablet, but inside her chest, her heart was beating faster than she wanted to admit. She had spent 15 years building relationships with alien species, learning their customs, earning their trust. All of that work was about to be erased. High Chancellor Vethran rose from his throne at the center of the chamber. He was a Vethrani, a species that had ruled the Assembly for 3,000 years. His body was covered in shimmering scales that changed color with his mood, and right now they were a deep, satisfied purple. His 4 eyes swept across the gathered delegates before settling on the human ambassador. "The vote has been completed," Vethran announced, his voice booming through the chamber. 847 species have voted in favor. 12 have abstained. 3 have voted against. The motion carries. A wave of murmuring swept through the assembly. Some species cheered. Others remained silent. A few, the ones who had traded fairly with humans over the years, looked away in shame. "Humanity is hereby exiled from the galactic community," Vethran continued. "All trade agreements are void. All travel permits are canceled. All diplomatic protections are removed. You have 90 galactic cycles to withdraw from all territories outside your home system. After that time, the Sol system will be placed under permanent quarantine. Any human vessel found outside the quarantine zone will be destroyed without warning." Linda Morris did not flinch. She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply nodded once, as if the Chancellor had just told her the weather forecast. "The Assembly has listed the reasons for this decision," Vethran said, clearly annoyed by her lack of reaction. "Humanity has expanded too aggressively. Humanity has refused to accept limitations on their technology. Humanity has formed alliances with species that the Assembly has designated as dangerous or primitive. And most importantly, humanity has repeatedly demonstrated an inability to know their place in the galactic order." Linda finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. "May I respond, Chancellor?" Vethran waved one of his forearms dismissively. "You may speak, though it will change nothing." "I understand," Linda said. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could. "I want every species here to remember this moment. Remember that you voted to exile a people whose only crime was refusing to be small. Remember that you punished us for helping others, for sharing knowledge, for treating every species as equals, regardless of their technology level." Letting her words sink in. "Remember this most of all. We will not forget. We will not forgive. And we will not disappear." She gathered her belongings and walked toward the exit. As she passed the Vethrani delegation, she stopped for just a moment and spoke quietly enough that only they could hear. "You will regret this." Then she was gone. 3 hours later, Linda Morris stood in the communication center of humanity's embassy station, watching Earth appear on the main screen. President Samuel Grant looked tired. He was a man in his 60s with a kind face that had grown harder over the past few months as the vote approached. "How bad is it?" he asked. "As bad as we expected," Linda replied. 90 cycles. Complete withdrawal. Permanent quarantine." Grant nodded slowly. "Then we moved to Plan Omega. I'm calling an emergency session of the United Earth Council. Can you get back here in time? I'll be there in 6 hours." The council chamber in Geneva was built underground, protected by layers of steel and concrete and energy shields. It was designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. And today, it was filled with the most powerful people on Earth. Admiral Patricia Cole sat at the military table. Her silver hair pulled back tight, her uniform covered in medals from a dozen conflicts. She had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 20 years, and she had always known this day might come. "They've given us 8 months," she said, pulling up a holographic display of human territory. We have 47 colonies, 12 mining stations, 8 research outposts, and roughly 2 million citizens living off-world. Getting everyone home in time will be difficult, but possible. But that's not really the question, is it? Said Dr. Nathan Perry, the head of Earth's Advanced Research Division. He was a thin man with messy brown hair and glasses that he was always pushing up his nose. The question is what happens after we get everyone home. President Grant leaned forward. Dr. Perry, give us an update on Project Horizon. The room went quiet. Project Horizon was Earth's most closely guarded secret. Only a handful of people knew it existed, and even fewer understood what it actually was. Nathan stood and walked to the holographic display. He replaced the map of human territory with a complex diagram of something that looked like a giant ring made of strange metals and glowing crystals. For the past 12 years, we have been working on an alternative to the Assembly's relay network, he explained. As you know, all faster-than-light travel in the galaxy depends on a system of ancient relays, built by a species that disappeared millions of years ago. The Assembly controls these relays. They decide who can travel and where. He zoomed in on the ring diagram. Project Horizon is a new form of faster-than-light travel. It doesn't use the relays at all. Instead, it creates a direct portal between 2 points in space, regardless of distance. In theory, we could travel from Earth to the other side of the galaxy in seconds. In theory? Admiral Cole asked, raising an eyebrow. We've never tested it at full scale, Nathan admitted. But the mathematics are sound. The simulations are promising. I believe it will work. How long until you can test it? Grant asked. If we have full resources and no interruptions, 6 months? Grant looked around the room. He saw fear in some faces, uncertainty in others. But he also saw something else. He saw determination. He saw the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and world wars. Then that's what we do, he said. We're not going to spend the next 8 months feeling sorry for ourselves. We're not going to beg the Assembly to change their minds. We're going to use this time to build something they never expected. He stood up, his presence filling the room. The galaxy has told us we don't belong. Fine. We'll build our own place among the stars. We'll go where they can't follow. We'll become something they never imagined possible. Admiral Cole smiled for the first time that day. What are your orders, Mr. President? Bring everyone home safely. Strip our colonies of everything useful. And prepare for the greatest journey in human history. Linda Morris, watching via satellite link from her embassy ship, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. But humanity was already planning their revenge. Not through violence, not through war, but through something far more powerful. They would succeed beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And they would make sure the galaxy never forgot the mistake it had made. 6 months had passed since the Exile vote, and the galaxy was watching humanity with a mixture of curiosity and satisfaction. The Assembly expected tears. They expected begging. They expected humans to finally understand their place in the universe. Instead, they got something that made them deeply uncomfortable. Humans were leaving quietly, efficiently, and they were taking absolutely everything with them. Lieutenant Commander Derek Hughes stood on the bridge of the transport vessel Carolina, watching the mining colony of Kepler-7 grow smaller on his view screen. For 5 years, this asteroid had been home to 300 human miners and their families. They had built homes here, schools, a small hospital. They had carved a life out of cold rock and empty space. Now, it was empty. Final transport is away, reported Ensign Maria Santos, a young woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. All personnel accounted for. All equipment loaded? What about the infrastructure? Hughes asked. Dismantled and packed. Every solar panel, every air recycler, every meter of wiring. We even took the toilets. Hughes allowed himself a small smile. Those had been his orders, passed down from Admiral Cole herself. Leave nothing behind. Not a single bolt, not a single circuit, not a single drop of fuel. If the Assembly wanted humans gone, then humans would be gone completely, across the galaxy. The same scene was playing out at every human installation. Research stations that had taken decades to build were stripped bare in days. Trading posts that had once bustled with activity from dozens of species went dark and silent. Human merchants collected every debt they were owed, paid every debt they had, and vanished into the black. The assembly had expected the withdrawal to be chaotic and desperate. Instead, it was organized like a military operation, because that was exactly what it was. High Chancellor Vethrin received daily reports about the human withdrawal, and each one made him more uneasy. Something was wrong. Defeated species did not act like this. They did not leave with their heads held high. They did not refuse every offer of last-minute negotiation. They did not seem almost eager to be gone. They're planning something, he told his advisors. I can feel it. What could they possibly plan? Replied Admiral Lorax, the Assembly's military commander. They have no allies. No territory outside their home system. No access to the relay network. In a few months, they'll be trapped in their little corner of space, slowly forgetting that they ever reached for the stars. Vethrin was not convinced, but he had no evidence to support his fears. He could only watch and wait. On Earth's moon, deep beneath the gray surface, Dr. Nathan Perry had not slept in 3 days. The Project Horizon facility was a massive complex carved out of lunar rock, filled with equipment that had no name in any language because it had never existed before. At the center of everything was the ring, a perfect circle of metal and crystal, 50 meters in diameter, connected to power generators that could light up a small continent. Final calibrations complete, announced Chief Engineer Laura Mitchell. She was a heavy-set woman with calloused hands and a voice that could cut through any noise. She had built bridges, space stations, and orbital elevators, but nothing compared to this. We're as ready as we're ever going to be. Nathan nodded and picked up his communicator. Mr. President, we're ready for the first test. President Grant's voice came back immediately. Proceed, Dr. Perry, and good luck. The control room fell silent as Nathan walked to the main console. Every scientist and engineer in the facility had gathered to watch. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future. If the ring worked, they would have a path forward. If it failed, they would be trapped in the Sol system forever. Activating primary power, Nathan said, his fingers moving across the controls. Charging the field generators, the ring began to hum. The crystals embedded in its surface started to glow with a soft blue light that grew brighter with each passing second. The air itself seemed to vibrate, as if reality was holding its breath. Field strength at 40%, Laura reported. 50%. 60%. Nathan watched the readings carefully. Everything was within expected parameters. The equations were holding. The theory was becoming reality. 70%? 80%? 90%? The hum became a roar. The blue light became blinding. And then, with a sound like the universe itself cracking open, as the center of the ring transformed, where there had been empty space, there was now a window to somewhere else. Stars shone through the portal, unfamiliar constellations arranged in patterns that no human had ever seen. The destination was a star system 4,000 light-years away, a region of space so distant that assembly ships would need 50 years to reach it. The portal was stable. The portal was real. And it changed everything. Nathan Perry fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Around him, scientists and engineers were cheering, hugging, crying. Laura Mitchell simply stared at the portal, her mouth hanging open. It works, Nathan whispered. It actually works. President Grant arrived at the facility 3 hours later, accompanied by Admiral Cole and Ambassador Morris. They stood before the still-open portal, watching probe data stream in from the other side. The system has 7 planets, Nathan explained. 2 of them are potentially habitable. There are no signs of intelligent life or assembly presence. It's completely untouched. How far can this technology take us? Grant asked. In theory? The distance doesn't matter. We could reach the edge of the observable universe if we wanted to. Admiral Cole laughed, a sound of pure joy. The assembly thinks they've trapped us in a cage. They have no idea that we've just built wings. We have 2 months left before the quarantine takes effect, Grant said. How many of these devices can we build in that time? With full production capacity? At least 50. Enough to establish colonies across a dozen star systems. Linda Morris, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. What do we do about the assembly? They'll eventually realize what we've done. They'll come looking for us. Grant smiled, and there was something fierce in his expression. Let them look. By the time they understand what's happening, we'll be so far beyond their reach that they'll never catch up. The final day of the 90-cycle deadline arrived. Assembly observers positioned themselves at the edge of the Sol system, ready to enforce the quarantine. They expected to find a defeated species huddling on their homeworld, licking their wounds instead. They found something that made no sense. Earth was still there, blue and green and peaceful. But the massive fleet they had expected to see, the desperate military buildup of a cornered species, was nowhere to be found. There were only a handful of ships in orbit, mostly old cargo vessels and outdated patrol craft. The observers reported back to dubbed Chancellor Vethrin, with confusion in their voices. Where had the humans gone? What were they planning? Vethrin stared at the reports for a long time. Then he looked out his window at the stars, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid, because he was beginning to understand that humanity had not been preparing to fight against the quarantine. They had been preparing to make it completely irrelevant, and somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, a new civilization was being born. A civilization that owed nothing to the assembly, followed none of their rules, and answered to no authority but its own. The exile of Earth had been meant as a death sentence instead. It had become a liberation. 3 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the Galactic Assembly had almost forgotten about the small blue planet trapped behind their quarantine zone. There were other matters to attend to: trade disputes, border conflicts, endless political games that kept the galaxy running. Humanity was a closed chapter, a problem that had been solved, or so they believed. Captain Gary Palmer stood on the bridge of the exploration, his vessel New Frontier, watching an alien sunset paint the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. The planet below them was called Haven, the 17th world that humanity had colonized since the exile. It had forests of crystal trees that sang when the wind blew through them, oceans of liquid silver, and mountains that touched the clouds. Beautiful, isn't it? Said Navigator Susan Blake, a red-haired woman with freckles and a perpetual smile. Hard to believe that 3 years ago we were stuck in one little solar system. The assembly did us a favor, Gary replied. They forced us to find our own way. And look what we found. The door to the bridge opened, and Communications Officer Kevin Walsh rushed in with excitement written all over his young face. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's not human. It's not assembly. It's something completely new. Gary felt his heart skip a beat. In 3 years of exploration, humanity had found many wonders, strange planets, bizarre phenomena, remnants of ancient civilizations. But they had not found what they were truly looking for. They had not found other intelligent species, until now. Let's put it on screen, Gary ordered. The view screen flickered, and then they saw them. They were tall and slender, almost delicate, with skin that glowed softly like moonlight. They had no eyes that Gary could see, but instead had a band of crystalline tissue across their faces that shimmered with internal light. Delicate wings, 3 sets of them, folded along their backs. We are the Luminari, the lead figure said, their voice like music. We have watched your ship approach our territory for several days. We have never seen technology like yours. We have never met beings like you. Who are you? Where do you come from? Gary took a deep breath. This was the moment that could define humanity's future. One wrong word could create an enemy. One right word could create a friend. We are humans, he said. We come from a planet called Earth, very far from here. We were cast out by a group called the Galactic Assembly. They told us we didn't belong among the stars. We're here to prove them wrong. The Luminari were silent for a long moment. Then, the leader did something unexpected. They laughed. It was a beautiful sound, like bells ringing in a spring breeze. Cost out. The luminary repeated. Yes, we know this feeling. The ones you call the Assembly, they came to our space long ago. They told us we were too primitive, too spiritual, too different. They drew a line on their maps and declared everything beyond it to be worthless. They forgot about us, and we have grown strong in their forgetting. Gary felt hope bloom in his chest. Then perhaps we have something in common. Perhaps we could be friends. Perhaps the luminary agreed. Come, visit our world. Let us learn about each other. The luminary were only the beginning. Over the next 2 years, humanity discovered that the galaxy was far larger and far more populated than the Assembly had ever admitted. Beyond the borders of Assembly space, in the regions marked as empty or dangerous on official maps, there were hundreds of intelligent species. Some were ancient and wise. Some were young and curious. Some had been hiding from the Assembly for millennia. Others had never even heard of it, and all of them were interested in the strange. New species that had appeared from nowhere with impossible technology and friendly intentions. Ambassador Linda Morris, now operating from a mobile diplomatic station that could appear anywhere in the galaxy through the Horizon Network, became the busiest person in human space. She met with species that communicated through colors, species that lived in the hearts of stars, species that existed partially in dimensions that humans couldn't even perceive. The key, she told President Grant during one of their weekly briefings, is that we're treating them as equals. Assembly sorts species into hierarchies. They decide who matters and who doesn't based on technology and military power. We're offering something different. We're offering partnership. The Terran Coalition, as it came to be called, grew faster than anyone had expected. The Luminar were the first to formally join, followed by the Vorath, proud reptilian species that had been used as slave labor in assembly mining operations for generations. Linda personally negotiated the Vorath Treaty. She met with their leader, a battle-scarred warrior named Kreth, on a neutral asteroid where neither side had advantage. "Why should we trust you?" Kreth demanded. His voice was like grinding rocks, and his yellow eyes held centuries of suspicion. "Your species is weak. Young, you have no empire, no armies, no history of conquest." "That's exactly why you should trust us," Linda replied. "We have nothing to prove. We have no old grudges to settle. We don't want to rule anyone. We just want to build something better than what the Assembly offers. And what do you want from us in return? Your friendship, your knowledge, your strength, not as servants or soldiers, but as partners. Equals working toward a common goal." Kreth studied her for a long time. Then he extended his clawed hand. "The Vorath have been slaves for 800 years, he said. We have forgotten what it means to be free. Perhaps you can help us remember." Linda took his hand without hesitation. "Together we'll build a galaxy where no one is ever enslaved again." By the 5th year of exile, the Terran Coalition included 47 species. They had established trade routes that stretched across regions of space the Assembly didn't even know existed. They had built research stations where scientists from different worlds worked side by side, combining their knowledge to create technologies that none of them could have developed alone. And they had built a military Admiral Patricia Cole, now commanding a fleet of ships crewed by humans and aliens alike, reviewed the latest strategic reports with a mixture of pride and concern. "The Assembly is getting nervous," she told her staff. "Their scouts have spotted our ships in regions they thought were empty. They've intercepted our trade vessels at the edges of their space. They're starting to ask questions." "Let them ask," said Captain Gary Palmer, who had risen quickly through the ranks after his first contact with the Luminari. "By the time they understand what we've built, it'll be too late for them to stop us." "That's what worries me," Cole admitted. "The Assembly has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They won't give up their power without a fight. And when they do fight, a lot of people are going to die." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. The Assembly had the largest military force in known space. They had weapons that could crack planets and ships that could darken suns. They decided that the Terran Coalition was a threat. They would come with everything they had. "Then we need to be ready," Palmer said quietly. "We need to be so strong that they'll think twice before attacking. And if they attack anyway, we need to be ready to win." Cole nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I intend to do. The Assembly made a mistake when they exiled us. They gave us time to grow, Time to learn. Time to build alliances they never expected. Now we're going to make sure they understand exactly how big that mistake was. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, humanity and their allies prepared for the storm that was coming. They built ships and trained soldiers. They developed weapons and strengthened defenses. They did everything they could to be ready for the day when the assembly would finally realize the truth. The species they had thrown away had become the greatest threat they had ever faced, and the galaxy would never be the same again. High Chancellor Vethrin had ruled the Galactic Assembly for nearly 200 years. In that time, he had crushed rebellions, negotiated treaties, and maintained the delicate balance of power that kept 1,000 species in line. He had never failed. He had never been surprised. He had never been afraid. Until now, the intelligence report sat on his desk like a poisonous snake, its contents too terrible to fully accept. He had read it 7 times, hoping that somehow the words would change, that he had misunderstood something crucial. But the words remained the same, and they painted a picture that made his 4 hearts beat faster with fear. The Terran Coalition, his chief intelligence officer had written, now controls territory equal to approximately 25% of assembly space. Their population, including allied species, exceeds 12 billion. Their fleet consists of approximately 30,000 combat vessels, many equipped with technology we cannot identify or understand. They possess the ability to travel instantly between any 2 points in space without using the relay network. They have formed alliances with species we believed to be extinct, primitive, or mythological. Vethrin set down the report and stared out his window at the assembly station's central plaza. Delegates from hundreds of species moved through the space below, going about their daily business, completely unaware that their entire way of life was about to be challenged. How did this happen? He asked Admiral Lorax. Standing at attention near the door, shook his head. We underestimated them, Chancellor. We assumed that Exile would break them. Instead, it freed them, without our restrictions, without our oversight. Without our control, they were able to develop in ways we never anticipated. The Horizon technology, Vethrin said. How close are we to replicating it? Our scientists have been studying captured fragments for 2 years. They say it will take at least another century before we understand the basic principles, let alone build working devices. A century. The Assembly didn't have a century. It barely had years before the Coalition grew too powerful to challenge. 8. Then we must act now, Vethrin declared. Before they become unstoppable, summon the War Council. We will gather every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We will go to the Sol System and destroy the heart of humanity's power. Chancellor Lorax said carefully, our intelligence suggests that Earth may not be their primary base anymore. They could have moved their government, their industry, their population anywhere in the galaxy. Then we will make an example of their homeworld. We will show them, and all their allies, what happens to those who defy the Assembly. Once Earth is ash, their coalition will collapse. Our allies will abandon them. Order will be restored. Lorax wanted to argue, wanted to point out the flaws in this plan, but he had served Vethrin long enough to know when the Chancellor's mind was made up. He simply saluted and went to carry out his orders. The mobilization took 6 months. Ships were recalled from every corner of assembly space. Reserve fleets that had not flown in generations were activated and crewed. Weapons that had been forbidden by ancient treaties were brought out of storage and installed on the largest battleships. When the Armada was finally assembled at the edge of assembly space, it was the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 warships stretched across the void like a wall of steel and fire. 800 species had contributed vessels, soldiers, and resources. The combined firepower could crack moons and boil oceans. Admiral Lorax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, watching the fleet fall into formation around him. Despite his earlier doubts, he felt a surge of confidence. No force in the galaxy could stand against this armada. The humans and their allies would be swept away like dust before a storm. Set course for the Sol System, he ordered. Maximum speed. The journey took 3 weeks using the relay network. 3 weeks of ships jumping from relay to relay, drawing closer to their target with each passing day. 3 weeks of soldiers checking their weapons and preparing for battle. 3 weeks of Lorax reviewing intelligence reports and planning his attack. When the fleet finally emerged from the last relay jump into the Sol system, Lorax felt his confidence waver. Something was wrong. Earth hung in space exactly where it should be, a blue and green jewel against the blackness. The moon orbited silently nearby. The other planets of the system moved along their ancient paths. Everything looked exactly as it had 6 years ago, when the quarantine was established. But there was no fleet, no defensive stations, no weapons platforms, no signs of the military buildup that Lorax had expected. "All out, scan the system," he ordered. "Find their ships." His sensor officers worked frantically, sweeping every corner of the system with instruments that could detect a single ship from light years away. They found nothing. A few old cargo vessels, some satellites. A handful of small craft moving between Earth and the moon, Chancellor Lorax said, opening a communication channel to Vethran's ship. "The system appears to be undefended. I don't understand. Our intelligence said they had thousands of ships." "It's a trick," Vethran replied. "They're hiding somewhere. Cloaking technology, perhaps? Or they've hidden their fleet behind one of the gas giants. Find them." Lorax ordered his ships to spread out in search. For hours, they scanned every corner of the Sol system. They found nothing. Earth remained silent, offering no resistance, making no attempt to communicate. "Perhaps they fled," one of his officers suggested. "Perhaps they knew we were coming and abandoned their homeworld." Lorax didn't believe that. Humans didn't flee. That was the one thing every species in the galaxy knew about them. Humans stood and fought, even when victory was impossible. They were stubborn to the point of madness. They would never abandon Earth without a fight, unless they had something else planned. "All ships, defensive formation," Lorax ordered suddenly. Now his officers looked at him in confusion, but they obeyed. The massive armada began to shift. Warships moving into protective clusters, weapons powering up, shields activating. They were almost in position when space itself began to tear open. The horizon portals appeared everywhere at once. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They opened in front of the assembly fleet, behind it, above and below, and on every side. And from each portal came ships. Coalition ships. Sleek vessels of impossible design, crewed by humans and Luminari and Voreth, and species that Lorax didn't even recognize. The trap had been sprung. Admiral Patricia Cole sat in the command center of her flagship, the Unity, watching the assembly fleet suddenly find itself surrounded. Beside her, Admiral Gary Palmer, Ambassador Linda Morris, representatives from every coalition species monitored the unfolding situation. "Open a channel," Cole ordered. "All frequencies." Communication officers complied, and suddenly Cole's voice was being heard on every ship in both fleets. "This is Admiral Patricia Cole of the Terran Coalition to all assembly vessels. You have entered Coalition space without authorization. You came here to destroy our homeworld and murder our people. Under Coalition law, we would be justified in destroying every ship in your fleet." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we're not going to do that. We're not the assembly. We don't believe in punishment through destruction. We don't believe in making examples through slaughter. We believe in something better." She looked around at her bridge crew, the faces of humans and aliens who had built something together that the galaxy had never seen before. "We have 2 choices. Surrender your weapons and submit to Coalition escort, or attempt to fight your way out. I should warn you that option 2 will not end well for you. Our ships are faster, more maneuverable, and better armed than anything you've ever encountered. We also outnumber you 3 to 1. On the Eternal Judgment, Admiral Lorax stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Coalition fleet had appeared from nowhere, positioning themselves perfectly to maximize their advantage. His ships were scattered, caught in the middle of their defensive formation shift, unable to concentrate their fire. "Admiral," one of his officers said, voice trembling, "their weapons are charging. Should we return fire?" Lorax looked at the display again. The mathematics were clear. If they fought, they would lose. Not just the battle, but the fleet. The entire military might of the assembly would be destroyed in a single afternoon. "Stand down," he said quietly. All ships, stand down. High Chancellor Vethran's voice exploded across the communication channel. Lorax, what are you doing? I did not authorize surrender. With respect, Chancellor, you're not here. I am. And I will not sacrifice 10,000 ships and millions of soldiers for your pride. He took a deep breath. This battle is over. We've lost. For a long moment, silence hung over both fleets. Then, one by one, the assembly ships began powering down their weapons. Shields dropped. Engines went to minimum power. The greatest armada in galactic history surrendered without firing a single shot on the Unity. Admiral Cole allowed herself a small smile. Beginning escort procedures, she announced, "Welcome to Coalition space. I hope you enjoy your stay." The war that should have defined a generation had ended before it truly began. And now, the real work could start. The Great Hall of the Coalition. Its assembly was nothing like the chamber where humanity had been exiled 6 years ago, where the Galactic Assembly's hall was designed to intimidate. With towering platforms that emphasized the power of senior species, this one was built for equality. Every delegation sat at the same level. Every voice carried the same weight. Every species, from the ancient Luminari to the newest members who had joined just months ago, had an equal say in the proceedings. High Chancellor Vethran stood at the center of the hall. No longer surrounded by guards or advisors, he was alone, stripped of his ceremonial robes, wearing simple clothes that made him look like any ordinary Vethrani. His 4 eyes swept across the gathered delegates. And for the first time in his long life, he did not see fear in their faces. He saw curiosity. He saw patience. He saw something that might have been hope. Ambassador Linda Morris rose from the human delegation's position. She had aged in the years since the Exile vote, her hair now fully gray, lines marking her face that spoke of countless negotiations and sleepless nights. But her eyes still held that same quiet certainty that had unnerved Vethran so long ago, the assemblies. Invasion fleet has been disarmed, and its crews are being treated. According to coalition law, she announced, medical care, adequate food, comfortable quarters, no executions, no torture, no revenge. A murmur ran through the hall. Many of the species present had suffered under assembly rule for generations. They had expected, perhaps even hoped for, a more dramatic form of justice. I know some of you wanted blood, Linda continued. I understand that desire. The assembly has caused tremendous pain to many of the species in this room. They enslaved the Voroth for 800 years. They nearly drove the Luminari to extinction. They ignored and exploited countless others. She paused, looking directly at Vethran. But we are not the assembly. We do not believe that justice comes from cruelty. We believe that true strength lies in offering mercy to those who showed us none. Kreth, the Vorath leader, rose from his seat. His scarred face was unreadable, but his voice was steady. When the humans first came to us offering alliance, I asked their ambassador why we should trust a weak and young species. She told me that they had nothing to prove. She was wrong. He looked around the hall at the hundreds of species gathered there. They have proven everything. They have shown that power does not require cruelty. They have shown that strength does not require domination. They have built something that none of us believed possible. He turned to face Vethran directly. I spent my youth in assembly mining pits, Chancellor. I watched my parents die in those pits. I have more reason than most to want revenge. He paused. But revenge is what the old galaxy was built on. The coalition is built on something different. So I add my voice to the humans. I vote for mercy. One by one, other species rose to speak. The Luminari spoke of healing and new beginnings. Species that had been oppressed for centuries spoke of their hope for a better Futu. Even species that had been loyal assembly members talked about their growing realization that the old way was broken. When the vote came, it was unanimous. The assembly would not be destroyed. It would be offered something that it had never offered anyone else, a second chance. President Samuel Grant, attending via holographic projection from Earth, addressed the hall. Chancellor Vethran, on behalf of the Terran Coalition, I offer you and the species you represent full membership in our organization, not as conquered peoples, not as second-class citizens, but as equals, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Vethrin was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't understand. We tried to destroy you. We voted to exile you. We gathered the largest fleet in history to wipe your species from existence. And your response is to offer us membership? Yes, Grant said simply. Why? Linda Morris answered him. Because that's who we are, Chancellor. We're humans. We hold grudges, yes. We remember those who wrong us. But we also believe in redemption. We believe that people and species can change. We believe that the future doesn't have to be a mirror of the past. She walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. 6 years ago, you told us that we didn't know our place. You were right, but not in the way you meant. Our place isn't in some hierarchy, ranked according to how old our civilization is, or how powerful our weapons are. Our place is wherever we choose to make it, and we choose to make it here, building something new with anyone who wants to join us. Vethrin looked at her extended hand. In assembly culture, physical contact between species was rare, reserved for the closest of allies. The gesture was significant. What happens to the assembly? He asked. That's up to you. You can dissolve it and join the coalition as individual species. You can reform it according to coalition principles and become a regional government within our structure. Or you can maintain it as a separate entity and negotiate a treaty of cooperation. The choice is yours. And if we choose none of those options, if we refuse to change, Linda smiled sadly, then nothing happens. We don't force anyone to join us. But I think you'll find that, over time, more and more of your member species will choose to leave. The coalition offers something the assembly never could: genuine equality. That's a powerful thing. Species will follow it, whether you want them to or not. Vethrin understood. The coalition wasn't threatening to destroy the assembly. They were offering something far more dangerous. They were offering an alternative. And once people saw that a better way was possible, they would never accept the old way again. He took Linda's hand. I accept your offer, he said. Not because I have no choice, but because I believe you're right. The galaxy needs to change. And perhaps it's time for my species to change with it. The transformation of the galaxy took generations. Old hatreds didn't disappear overnight. Species that had been enemies for millennia didn't become friends just because they were told to. There were setbacks and conflicts and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But slowly, steadily, things got better. Trade routes expanded, connecting regions of space that had never communicated before. Scientific cooperation led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Cultural exchanges introduced species to new ideas, new art, new ways of seeing the universe. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to do what it had always done: adapt, learn, grow, and reach for the stars. Admiral Patricia Cole retired to a small house on the coast of Earth, where she spent her days writing her memoirs and watching the ocean. Her book, titled The Long Journey Home, became required reading in schools across the coalition. In the final chapter, she wrote, "They voted to exile us because they feared what we might become. They were right to fear us, but not for the reasons they imagined. We didn't conquer the galaxy. We didn't enslave it or exploit it. We did something far more dangerous to the old order. We freed it. And in the end, that was the most human thing we could have done." People ask me sometimes if I'm proud of what we accomplished. I tell them that pride is the wrong word. What I feel is gratitude. Gratitude for the scientists who built the Horizon Drive. Gratitude for the diplomats who forged our alliances. Gratitude for the soldiers who were willing to fight but never had to. Gratitude for every human and every alien who believed that a better galaxy was possible. We were exiled because they thought we were too aggressive, too ambitious, too unwilling to accept our place. They wanted to teach us humility. Instead, they taught us that we didn't need them at all. And in learning that lesson, we became something they never expected. We became hope. On Earth, in a park overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a monument stood where billions of visitors from hundreds of species came to pay their respects every year. It was a simple structure, just a stone pillar with words carved into its surface. The words read, "They told us to leave, so we built something better." Children played around the monument, children of every shape and size and color, speaking languages that had never existed on this planet before the exile. They laughed and chased each other and didn't think about the history that had brought them here. That was exactly how it should be. The past was the past. The future was wide open. And somewhere out there, among the countless stars that humanity and its allies now called home, a new story was just beginning, one that would last forever.